Sometime later, the boys return to the dungeon, and this time, working as a team, manage to defeat the boss monster and virus. Time continues to pass naturally, and Will is completely focused on getting a perfect score so he can climb the tower and finally reach the elf. As the days go by, the exam season is coming to an end, and many teachers are impressed since Will Selford is the only student with a perfect score in all the exams. Even Lihana, considered the exemplary student, made a few small mistakes, but Will maintained absolute perfection. Werner, for his part, is extremely excited, and teacher Elisa approaches to congratulate him, as after all his effort, he will finally realize his dream. Meanwhile, Julius and Sion are meeting with the principal, who congratulates them on having defeated the Guardian of the Floor, even with such a tight schedule. However, upon receiving his wand, Julius comments that he was only included in that mission because he already had his spot, guaranteed in the tower without needing to defeat the one in virus. Sion then teases him, saying that his absence wouldn't have even been noticed since his precious ice melted almost instantly. In other words, he was useless. Julius retorts, reminding Sion that he only hid behind another to cast fireballs, as always. The two start to argue while the principal observes how obvious it is that they care about Will, which only makes them even more irritated. Meanwhile, Will is studying desperately. He hasn't slept for days, but he refuses to slow down because he knows that a single point can change everything. Khalid suggests that he rest, but Will responds that, thanks to Lihana and the others, he achieved the maximum score in the practical activities. Therefore, he needs to keep pushing, as he doesn't want all the help he received to be in vain. Rossi reminds him that he also earned credits in spellcasting after defeating Professor Edward, but Will insists that he is still 1 point short and needs to secure it. At that moment, Rossi pulls a white hair from him and says that if he doesn't rest, many more will appear. Khalid gets annoyed and asks what he is doing, and Rusty replies that he is just doing what he always does, teasing her by asking if she wanted to do the same. Embarrassed, Colette doesn't know how to respond, and Rusty ends up winning the competition. On the other hand, Lihana tells Whiten that after they defeat the Naviros, they will be able to ascend the tower with pride. Whitney responds that it wasn't that difficult, considering they have faced a Grand Duke before. As they walk, he comments that Lihana has changed a lot, as she no longer seems as tense as before. She agrees, remembering that he always hid his true intentions behind a smile, never letting his guard down. Whitney then admits that this is due to Will, who showed him that even he can make big mistakes and has earned his respect since then. And Hannah also states that she has learned a lot from Will, understanding that cowardice can just be a feeling of inferiority that can also turn into courage. They wonder what Will might be doing at that moment and soon conclude that it's obvious that Bookworm is probably studying at night. Khalid, worried, goes to bring something for Will to eat, since he has spent the whole day in the library. When she arrives, she notices that he has fallen asleep, so she covers him with a sheet. Confirming that he is asleep, she excitedly murmurs and tries to steal a kiss, but Host appears and stops her. She tries to justify herself, saying she was just taking care of him, but Host doesn't believe it and states that she was clearly trying to kiss him. Leet feigns innocence and says she is just worried about Will, as despite being exhausted, he keeps pushing himself too hard and always ends up hurt. She admits that she hates wizards, as Will is always chasing after Alvasbina as if he were enchanted, while she just waits for him in the tower, without helping him. Colette confesses that she feels pity for Will, and Rose agrees. Meanwhile, at the top of the tower, Faria finds Eleanor, who comments that it is strange to see her out of her quarters, as she is the embodiment of laziness. Faria teases her, asking if she is still bothered by having lost a fight. Eleanor replies that she only lost because she was limited to ice magic, and if she could use other elements, she would have won. At that moment, Zay appears and tells the two of them to stop making noise and get out of the way. Faria asks what he is doing there, and Zay answers that it is obvious. They are all there for the same reason, the Terminalia. They need to start preparing for the ritual, as the barrier is about to disappear. Edward prepares for the final exam, whose topic will be the origin of magic. The next day, upon entering the room, he announces that the test will consist of only one question, and whoever answers correctly will receive 6 credits. He makes it clear that he will not accept any doubts, and that students must demonstrate everything they have learned over the 6 years at the academy. When the tests are distributed, everyone is surprised to see the question, "What is magic?" Despite being a complex topic, they believe they will be able to answer, after all. It is a question whose answer every mage or elf eventually reaches. The detail is that anyone who is not a mage would have no idea how to respond to that. The students, worried, begin to wonder what will happen to Will, while he, for his part, goes completely blank. After all, this is a question that cannot be found in books, as it requires each one to explain in their own words what magic is. Even in the face of this, and despite the entire situation, Will does not think of giving up. He wants to reunite with Elf and fulfill his promise, so he starts to write what magic means to him. An unattainable miracle, as beautiful as it is cruel. Magic is that which lies beyond effort, and he believes that if he does not give up, he may achieve something equal to or even greater than it. In the end, he writes his answer, but we are left in suspense. In another scene, Walker questions Edward about what he intends with that exam. Calmly, Edward responds that he only asked a basic question that any aspiring mage should know how to answer, and that only 4 out of 10 students were unable to, something that disappointed him quite a bit. Walker, irritated, knows very well that this was done to harm a single student and asks if he is not ashamed. Edward then pushes him and asserts that they are being irrational by trying to send someone incapable of using magic to the tower, saying it makes no sense to send him to that graveyard of wands to be used for experiments. In a world where magic reigns, a sword can never replace a wand. He further claims that both Walker and the principal are crazy and that he just destroyed a dream that could never be realized. Shortly after, we see the list of those who failed, and Will's name is there. He graduated with 7,199 credits, but his ascent to the tower was denied due to being just 1 point short. Will is completely devastated. Time passes, and in a garden, Rossi finds him to return his repaired glasses. Will, frustrated, comments on the cruelty of Professor Edward, saying it was obvious that he would never be able to answer that question. He feels defeated for not being able to keep his promise. He leans in and hugs him, saying that nothing can ease his pain at that moment, but that no matter what happens, he will always be by his side. Meanwhile, Khalid reunites with Whitney and Lihana, asking if they have found Will, but no one has succeeded. Sion appears and comments that at this time, students who fail to ascend the tower usually leave the academy. He complains that they are wasting time looking for a useless person and says that Will probably ran away like a coward. Whitney immediately reprimands him, demanding respect and reminding him that he should not insult a fellow elf's friends. Julius retorts, saying that in that academy, magic is everything, and as good as Will may be in the dungeon, that place is not for someone who wields a sword. Keon observes Julius and, when questioned, admits that he also cannot stand Will, saying that he irritates him deeply and that he wanted to defeat him personally. What bothers him the most is that he lost that opportunity. At that moment, Werner appears and asks what they are doing there. Khalid explains that they are looking for Will, and Werner suggests that they relax and enjoy themselves, as he will look for him himself, reminding them that it is the night of the Terminalia. Meanwhile, the New Year's Eve celebrations begin. The event's host, Claire, a 27-year-old mage, introduces herself with good humor, complaining that she invited friends who ended up making excuses involving their students to not attend. She even mentions Walker and Edward, recalling that they were inseparable as children, before attempting to regain her composure in front of the audience. The students gather for the celebration, but soon start to disperse. Claire then tells the story of the ancestors who lived in ignorance until the arrival of invaders from the sky. When all hope seemed lost, the great Mercedes appeared, leading 5 powerful mages that sealed the sky and repelled the invaders. This happened 500 years ago. However, Iris reveals that the current barrier will only hold for 1 more year, so it needs to be recreated annually. For if it falls, the tragedy of the past may repeat itself. There can be no mistakes. A group of magicians from the Fire faction guarantees that everything will go perfectly, while at the top of the tower, the Sovereign Carrie and the other sovereigns prepare to raise the new barrier. She asks all the magicians to raise their wands and unite their powers to protect their home, supporting the magic sender in the creation of the new barrier. When the clock strikes midnight, they begin the ritual, conjuring the supreme magic of the Great Barrier, the Terminalia. In moments, the new barrier is raised, marking the start of a new year. However, while everyone celebrates, something strange happens. A mysterious text appears in the sky, wishing a happy new year. The atmosphere turns dark. Portals begin to open and demons emerge from them, plunging all of Hardin into chaos. Meanwhile, those responsible for the attack comment that this is the perfect moment to hold a true infernal feast, as the magic sender are completely exhausted after creating the barrier. For his part, Will worries when he sees the portals. Meanwhile, in the capital, the Diobaros are devastating everything. Fire faction guards wonder what the hell the dungeon monsters are doing on the surface. Seeing that the situation is getting ugly, Claire tells Red that she will cover them. So, it's time to start attacking. With just a breath of her wand, Claire summons a large number of guardians that advance against the Dioboros, giving Rhodes' squad the opportunity to attack with their fire magic. They annihilate the monsters in their path. Now, in turn, If asks how Claire summoned so many guardians. However, it doesn't take long for the boys to understand that this is the level of the tower's high wizards. Radio orders to look for the origin of the magic circles and capture the person responsible. Although one of the monsters remains as if nothing were happening, Radio attacks him again with his most powerful magic, trusting that this has defeated him. However, his arrogance was his worst mistake. Claire, for her part, orders him to flee, but the monster doesn't give him the opportunity. With a slash of his claw, he cuts him in two. Claire worries when she realizes that the monster is immune to magic. When he looks at his guardians, he sees that they are being annihilated. The monster now advances against Claire, who manages to avoid it and realizes that he is carrying a mage-killing sword. Director Cowron watches the entire disaster, while the other wizards report that apparently the monsters are carrying wizard-slaying swords similar to the ones Finn was carrying. Cowron wonders if managed to mass-produce them and concludes that it must not have been the work of a single person. Since this whole disaster is very well planned, she wonders what the hell they are up to. At that moment, A of the teachers tells the director that the academy should also help. However, she refuses, as she feels that the attack on the city is nothing more than a distraction and orders the wizards to defend the tower with their lives. For their part, the Magia vendor understand that the culprits are after them, taking advantage of the opportunity that they have exhausted their strength after erecting the Great Barrier. Flame Faction recommends to their Lord Harriet that the Magia vendor help in the battle, otherwise more civilian lives will be lost. However, at that moment, Aaron tells him to shut up. He asks if he wants his throat to suffer the same fate as his eyes. When they ask him if he really wants them to just watch, he responds that this is exactly what they must do. He orders that no vending magic leaves that room, because if the Great Barrier falls due to the lack of one of the supreme rods, the celestial invaders will end with everything, and it won't just be Harney, but the entire world that will be reduced to ashes. For their part, the Headless One and his companion are disappointed to see that the magic sellers have no intention of leaving, despite have used a good bait. Still, at least they enjoy the great spectacle. They watch people's misfortunes with amusement. A girl desperately tries to save her mother, but at that moment she appears a huge monster about to devour them. Iris arrives at the scene to try to protect them. Unfortunately, her magic has no effect due to the mage-killing sword. The monster prepares to send them from this to better, but at that exact moment, Will enters the battlefield, and Headless's companion, who, according to Mr. Gluglu, is called Marcy, reacts when he sees that they managed to cut off the monster's arm. I think he always hated being looked down upon for not being able to use magic. At times, he even hated magicians, but he would never want something like that to happen. As he advances, he annihilates everyone, the monsters in his path, protecting as many civilians as possible. Rasta warns him that he should only focus on those carrying swords, as the wizards can defeat those who are unarmed. Without wasting time, Will faces one of these monsters and manages to cut it in two. Iris, surprise, knows that Will is capable of this. He can handle the mage-killing swords, but not will be able to do this alone for a long time. So, at that moment, Aaron communicates with her and tells her that he grants her absolute authority. He orders to mobilize the dwarves and stop this barbarity. Without wasting time, she orders the Watchers who, in the name of Astro the King, declare the Goodwill Code, nullifying the restrictions placed on the dwarves. Now all wizards must coordinate with them to repel the threat. On the other hand, Walker runs desperately and reunites with Donan's group. Asking them to please help in the fight, the owner complains, asking how he could want to put them to work in the new year. However, his wife asks him not to complain, as Will needs the help. Their part, Edward tells all the students that he needs everyone's help. It doesn't matter if they are students, they are wizards and must use their wands to protect the city. They don't really agree, because if not even the high mages of the tower can defeat these things, much less them. So, Liana takes it upon herself to give a demonstration of strength, proving that even a student has great power. The problem is that despite strengthening her entire body, she is still not able to defeat these monsters with a single blow. The most worrying is the sword they have, since in any way she is the nemesis of every magician. At that moment, Kolek meets with Lihana and asks her not to do anything crazy. However, as soon as Kolek arrives, Lihana asks her to do something crazy. Madness, Julius comments. That, at this rate, they won't last until the dwarves arrive. If those monsters defeat Lihana, they will be next. so he proposes to escape. However, Zonggong warns that when dispersing a spell, the monster's movements are hampered. Therefore, they need to attack them with everything. Young people then advance with their magic at their maximum. When they see that the monsters have already, they are unable to move because they need to block the attack. They order Kolek to do his part. She is a little apprehensive and asks Saint Viola for forgiveness because, using her magic, she lifts the huge statue to crush the monsters. With this, they manage to win. However, Julius comments that they will be cursed for having destroyed the statue of an ancient magic. Without wasting time, Lihana orders everyone Earth Wizards to launch projects, even if they are stones, because the time has come to transform knowledge into wisdom. Claire observes everything and feels satisfied to see that. That year, the tower will receive extraordinary mages. She orders the Flame faction to coordinate with the mages of the land until the dwarves arrive, and, although she hates accepting the dwarves' help, she has no other option. The Headless One comments that Rarden isn't doing bad at all. Mars mentions that it's a shame that the idiots who produced the Slains found that expedition. To make matters worse, Aaron's group and the final dwarf stole one of them. Analyze it and discover a countermeasure for the mage-slaying swords. This will be a big problem for your plans. Furthermore, if no one had seen your ace up your sleeve, the attack would have been perfect. The Headless Man says that there is nothing to worry about, because even with the unforeseen events, everything is happening as expected. So, the time comes to invoke that. Right at that moment, in front of Will, a huge portal begins to form. From this portal, a powerful monster emerges that, with a single blow, launches him away, causing him to collide against several buildings. Meanwhile, in another point, Fim defeats several terrorists. When he suspects that they were the ones who created the Matamago swords, he demands that one of them tell everything he knows. However, the man responds that this will not help his mission. It was just to lure him into the depths of the dungeon. While on the surface they cause a great disaster, Sim sends him to the other world with a kick. He becomes thoughtful. Back to Will, the new monster advances against him, cutting a building in half. Luckily, Will manages to dodge it and realizes that that creature is much stronger than a Grand Duke. The reader recognizes that it is a Devander, a monster of elite of the 4th floor, an aberration famous for being capable of even killing a magic salesman. Marcy comments that putting that thing in the portal cost the lives of 50 soldiers, and that it wasn't either easy to capture him alive. But now, with him on the battlefield, everything will get out of control. Will understands that he cannot face it and has no choice but to flee. However, upon seeing the monster approaching other students, he can't stay still and moves forward to stop the attack. Still, the damn wizards keep calling him useless. Meanwhile, Will just orders him to run away. Devander throws him away with a kick and then, at high speed, throws him against the ground, almost ending his life. But luckily, Donan arrives to help him and asks him to rest for a while. Little, as they will take care of that monster. Iris orders everyone who can still fight, go to the bookworm, that is, Will. Now, the defender is the highest priority. However, at that moment, the corpses of the other monsters begin to release a miasma. This miasma is absorbed by the defender. Edward realizes what is happening and orders to collect the magical remains. But the Headless One warns that it is already too late. The defender absorbs the magical remains of each corpse, leaving each stronger and stronger. Donan tries to attack him to prevent his strengthening, but Marcio stops him and orders them to just watch the birth of a true monster. By absorbing everything, Devander evolves, and, instantly, he eliminates several dwarves. Marcio just laughs, saying that against that creature, neither magic nor strength will be enough. Will realizes that the attack on the city was just a way to strengthen his weapon's secret. The ceremony and the city were nothing more than tools to create the perfect magic killer, vendors. He understands that, to defeat that monster, he needs to use that roast power again. Without hesitation, he approaches to activate the magic on Will's sword. But, in an instant, the monster intercepts him and cuts off Roast's arm. This awakens an uncontrollable fury in Will, who advances against the sword. Creature taking it to another place. Roast then asks Kiki to go and collect it, while he stays to protect his master. Kiki obeys. Rossi thinks that, after all, everything was already destined to happen. So Will laments, because not even when overcome by fury, he can defeat that thing. He feels powerless in the face of the injustice of the world. Desperate, he wonders what he can do. Unfortunately, at that moment, Devander attacks with everything. When the dust settles, Will is shocked to see that Rossi sacrificed himself for him. Before disappearing, Rossi says he will always be by his side, and then he disintegrates. Will remembers everything he lived with him. Blinded by anger, he ends up falling into the abyss. Luckily, Walker saves him at the last second. He quickly leaves the place along with Will, who is blinded by Ross's death. Meanwhile, in the tower, his furious man decides to go down when he sees all the lives that are being lost. Although he sees lesser wizards as flies, he can't just sit by and watch them die. However, Carrie reminds him that he can't do that. Defeat a magic cell, the Great Barrier will collapse. If that happens, the celestial invaders will reduce the entire world to ashes. Furthermore, they are not in their best condition. The first thing that what they should do is recover their magical power. She reminds him of what being a magic cell entails. Therefore, she asks him to sit back in his seat. Although Heaven doesn't give a damn and comments that it seems like the title of selling magic is given to the most cowardly magicians, he prepares to leave. But Carrie throws him a fire arrow and recommends that he sit in the damned place. Otherwise, he will be forced to take him by force. Both are excited, and Helenor's assistant covers herself with her cloak, recommending not to splash her lady. She takes the opportunity to ask what they should do, although Helenor responds that they just waited and should not act because that city does not belong to elves. Her second assistant, Philvis, remembers that there is an elf in the city. Angry, she orders them to go look for him. Meanwhile, for her part, Euphoria gets up from her seat and advances towards Aaron, ordering him to withdraw the order because they are just wasting time there. He makes it clear that he does not think to change her mind, provoking the wrath of Euphoria, who freezes the entire place. She makes it clear that she does not intend to abandon her loved ones. She will save Will. If he stands in her way, will freeze your insides. For his part, Werner thinks that currently his only hope is Will, but he is in a regrettable state. Will blames himself for not being able to use magic, which is why he cannot protect Rusty. He can't protect anyone and feels like he's just useless, like they always tell him. Crying, he wonders why he's the only one who can't use magic. Werner asks him to calm down. However, in front of them appears Mars, determined to kill Will, seeing that he can cause much more problems than the dwarves, on the other hand, continue to fight. After protecting Kiki, Cole hears an explosion. Soon after, Kiki appears, and upon seeing that she is sad, understands that the explosion was caused by Will Sem. He hesitates, takes Kiki and runs, asking her to guide her to him. Scion, upon hearing it, goes with Colette and orders Julius to take care of that place. Vinyl and Lihana also order him to start creating his clones, making Julius angry when he sees that they treat him like an errand boy. Meanwhile, the Headless Man controls the Orchestra of Destruction and orders Allender to head to the academy. Upon seeing him, Sarah tries to stop him, but it doesn't do much. Seeing the situation, Eduardo orders the dwarves to get up and prepare for a suicide attack on the central square. They must destroy, whatever the cost, the magic that leads to Vander. She asks who he thinks he is to send them to die, remembering that Donan and the boys were defeated because they were his shield. Now, he wants them to die. Eduardo confirms that they must protect the capital and children. At that moment, one of the Noboros attacks Dina. But surprisingly, Edward saves her, receiving the attack. After getting rid of the Dinoboros, Dina asks why the hell he saved her. Edward makes it clear that they are now facing someone immune to magic. This means that his life is worth much less than hers. He is willing to pay with the same coin for them to give their lives for theirs. Angry, Dina stands up and orders the dwarves to gather together to go to the central square. For his part, Kolit continues advancing in search of Will, but in front of them, a Dinoboros appears with a magic that makes Kolit's magic useless. She tries to finish him with more powerful magic. However, at that moment, his bracelet begins to activate, causing Kolit to become distracted. Estelar, in danger, desperate, invests with everything. On the other hand, we see how the mages are falling to the Technoboros, so Mike orders the civilians to run south together. The mages who were saved by Will are fighting, although one of them tells his companion that they must flee the scene, but he responds that they cannot flee after they have been saved. Jula orders him to stop playing the hero, although they would have almost been sent to the afterlife if not for Elisa, who warns them that evacuating the injured is not the same as running away. She orders them to do so while taking care of the monsters. Kids leave. She stays to face a large wave of monsters. The city is destroyed. Several students and civilians, seeing their imminent end, have no other option but to cry for their loved ones, dear ones. Your part, Iris, thinks that with the help of the dwarves, they managed to reduce the threat of the Matamagos. But unfortunately, no one is able to stop the Under. All the fronts that are being defended, little by little, they are falling. They no longer have strength, and the few remaining dwarves are not enough to stop that monster. She wonders what the hell they could do, but at that moment, she starts to hear something on the magic radio. She asks what's going on, but just then, the end appears in front of her. She asks where the sword is. On the other hand, Mars mentions that bastard is quite good, since, despite the situation, he tried to give him a mortal blow. Even so, he managed to hit him squarely. For his part, Will wonders where they are, and the walker, who is in the smoke. He tells him that they are on the western outskirts of the city. The detail is that upon leaving the smoke screen, Will is paralyzed when he sees that Werner has a huge hole in his chest. However, despite this, he is happy to know that he managed to protect him. He asks Will for forgiveness, but in this situation, now he can only depend on him. Werner is sure that Will save all of Rui Garden, but Will can't believe he feels frustrated because he can't protect those he cares about. Thinks a sword can never change the world. Will asks how a useless person without magic could be anything. Walker approaches to hug him, revealing that he has been lying all this time. The truth is that he can use magic. He has a single spell, capable of lighting the flame of hope in everyone around him. But before he can finish speaking, Werner dies. Will asks him, please, not to leave him alone. Furthermore, he asks how he can cast this spell. At that moment, Finn reunites with Will and tells him not to worry. Walker will survive and will breathe again as soon as his pulse recovers. Finn is surprised and tells him that now the most important thing is for him. He orders him to get up because he has everything ready. Will asks how he can do magic. Finn replies that he just heard about magic and started thinking that now he can throw fire. He asks him not to be so naive, since Walker talked about where willpower comes from, a kind of auto-suggestion, so to speak, how to raise your voice and encourage yourself to act. I respond that this very childish trick will be of no use, but End, a little more seriously, responds, stop talking nonsense. This is the most important thing of all. You cannot change the world if don't start by changing yourself. That's exactly what you've been looking for your whole life. He orders you to remember your roots and recover your origins. He gives you his sword and makes it clear that the lock is already open. By applying a drop of his blood, the sword will be imbued with great power. He mentions that he already knows the answer, and that now is the time to shout the spell he holds inside of himself, asks what his magic is called. While Will remembers everything he experienced at the academy, Rarden takes his sword and screams. Value without limit. Your hair changes color. You already know that every anime in which the protagonist has white hair is because there will be a tremendous power-up. In a matter of seconds, Will begins to destroy all the monsters in the city, leaves a white trail wherever it goes, eliminates everyone very easily, leaving everyone shocked, wondering if that really was Will. Meanwhile, for his part, Kion continues to protect the vest, but she orders him to flee the place because it is too dangerous. However, Sion refuses because he knows that Will would never do that. This coward is more brave than all of them together. He doesn't intend to be less than Will. At that moment, Will is driving at high speed and thinks that Sion is wrong because he has always envied them, but he also admired them. He chased the shadow of a wand, but the time has come to take his own path and become an arcane sword, thus destroying the monster's weapon and protecting Sion. On the other hand, Fim remembers the moment when he met with the great Mercedes. She held Will in her hands, commenting that they had bought some time until the celestial invaders destroyed everything. Enough time for her to create a bunch of wands and he a single sword. It was a contract that was proposed to be able to create someone capable of using the great fifth element, the key to tuning the world. Both understand that in order to save the world, both a wand and its sword must become one again in the present. As the End watches Will, he wonders if this will be the end, beginning of the opera that he had so desired with Mercedes, or the beginning of a great tragedy. It is time to reveal. The outcome of his contract with Queen Magalufaria, in turn, observes marveling at Will's power, while he, by repelling the monster, leaves everyone in shock. Those who see it wonder what the hell happened to him. William advances against the monster and eliminates it in a second, while on the other hand, the director is in charge of repelling the under with all her strength. The teacher at her side warns that it is time to evacuate, but she orders them to wait. At that moment, Will enters the eye. Jim and the director is surprised to see him. He advances imposingly, attacking the under, who counterattacks. Their forces collide. The whole city shakes with the sound of the impact. Bonnell and Lihana wonder if Will is fighting. Without wasting time, they go to him, just like Julius, who doesn't want to be left behind. In turn, Edward can't believe that it's Will. Several start to advance towards him. Meanwhile, in the tower, the wizards can't believe what they see in the crystal sphere. Euphoria blushes when realizing that her man is quite strong. Jacqueline gets up, and upon seeing Will's battle, wonders how he is now on equal footing against Ander. When, before he was no match for him, Ao notices Edward. She asks what is going on and who is that boy. Edward is relieved to see that his friend is okay, but he can't answer who the boy is. He is frustrated because before wanted to fail him, or rather, failed him. Now it's Will who is saving everyone. A group of students approaches the academy. When she sees that Will is struggling, Emma thinks she needs to help him. But her colleague Pau stops her, remembering that creature is immune to magic. If she hits Will by mistake, it would only make the situation worse. The others support Pooh, saying that this could make everything worse. And besides, they remember all the times they called Will useless, and the years they made fun of him. Now how would they look to ask if they could help him? Still, one of them responds that despite everything, Will saved them before now. He's fighting for them. They know they'd be hypocrites, but they'd like to do something for him. Suddenly, Chan appears out of nowhere, shouting to Will that he starts to scream with all his might. He's sure that Will can defeat that thing. Soon, they ask him to win. When Colette, Lihana, Winnie, and everyone start to encourage him, each one joins the crowd. They start to encourage Will. Even the followers of Chan and Julius join the chorus when they see that even their leaders support him. Everyone starts to encourage him. All the students start to cheer by Will. Meanwhile, Edward comments that he can't leave everything in the hands of someone who can't use magic. However, he doesn't have the strength. Claire says that he's being too overprotective and that it's time of trusting his students rather than just protecting them. Tota Rarden is rooting for Will, while Iris watches. As in a world where everything revolves around magic, now all the cheers are focused on a boy unable to use it. As Will faces the Under, he thinks he has always felt miserable. He was always excluded. Many made fun of him, so much so that he hated the world because of it. But deep in his heart, he just wanted to be accepted as he is. Even if this is the only time he receives so much support, everyone's voices give him enough strength to protect the world, and everyone who lives in it. He advances with all his strength against the Under. Unfortunately, his sword breaks. Euphoria has a premonition and looks down. Iris worries to see that the steel of the sword could not withstand Will's immense power. The students panic, but now he is at a disadvantage. Without his weapon, Euphoria starts to move. They try to remind her that she is prohibited from coming down from the tower, but she responds that she is only going to take a look from the balcony. As she leaves, she creates a sword and drops it. Asking apologies to others, "Magic cell," she says. She simply slipped. The sword falls to Will, and when he feels Euphoria's power, he raises the hilt of his sword. Broken, she absorbs her friend's power. Forging a new sword, Alves, upon seeing this, remembers that it was the same thing Will used when he faced the Great Duke. However, Julius wonders why would he do that, since that monster is immune to magic. Anders attacks against Will, but he feels that that creature won't be able to stop his attack. He attacks the cellar, causing massive damage. Everyone is impacted, as Edward realizes he used the whiz. On the other hand, Mace is furious, wondering what the hell is going on and why they are thwarting his plans. He wonders where that kid came from, while if I laugh, he comments that the boy is completely insane. The other Majavender understand that Will didn't use magic. What he used was the great fifth element, the key to origins. Aaron realizes that he has finally achieved what he was looking for, the union between the wand and the sword, the one sworn by the Wizard Queen. Meanwhile, Will continues attacking the cellar, dodging and freezing his blows. Look who is surprised as she can see that Will is using Alviz's power. Everyone is shocked. Well, it's as if Will were fighting side by side with Elfaria. Under reaches the limit, Mars, desperate, orders an all-out attack. He conjures a large number of portals, surrounding completely Will still. I would make a show of total confidence, saying that they can come as many as they want because now, together with Will, they are unstoppable. Will sticks his sword in the ground and charges to the maximum, activating Glass Frost, the seventh cruel Cardinia. This creates a huge temple that passes through all the monsters and instantly pulverizes them. Everyone present is stunned, and not even Edward himself can believe what he sees. The enemy drops his wand when he realizes that there is no longer any way to stop him. With that, Will decides to end the battle and advances against Deander, cutting him in half. With Alfaria's magic, he completely pulverizes him, ending the fight in an impressive spectacle. Everyone in Harry Garden is amazed at that victory. The boy, unable to use magic, performed miracles with it. Donovan and Dina are proud, as is Walker, who doesn't even know how he is still alive. Finn celebrates emotionally. Will exceeded all his expectations. Finally, they reached the last hope in the world. He apologizes to the great Mercedes for taking so long. He says he will now fulfill your part of the agreement. Hope she doesn't complain, since it's only been 500 years. Now, finally, you can close the prologue. It's time to open the curtains for the beginning of the story of a wand and a sword that intertwine.